See, perfect. Well, today you can hit exactly on what we're going to be chatting about, which is, uh, first of all, drones aren't falling out of the sky anymore, which is a big relief for a lot of us that are starting to use these in more sensitive places. But what drones as first responders, what drones for infrastructure inspection, drones for cinematics, all of these things and all these different backgrounds are converging and bringing a lot of this technology to places where are too hazardous for people. And the most important item, uncrewed. Um, I don't like to always use the disposable this platform, but in areas for Alaska, we can send this up the side of a mountain to go look at avalanche terrain or responding to critical infrastructure or flying it in buildings. And so, or responding to natural disasters like you see here. So a lot of these technologies are allowing for folks like us in Alaska, where we have limited crews, limited resources to now be in multiple places at once to dispatch these systems and to gather that data at a fast rate and to share that information. This is something that we found really interesting with our earthquake here in 2018 is we were able to share information so fast with the public that it kept them from going to these sites where we did have considerable infrastructure failure because it was so well documented. So once again, when we're looking at these items, when we're able to fly in these places, it's really helping us to share what's happening as well as allowing for responders to stay out of harm's way. So next slide. So a little bit about our program. We started about in 2016 and have pushed on since then, but our big push has been in capital projects, so survey and construction, and a lot of use case in just, hey, how do we repeat operations? How do we make sure the aircrafts are reliable? And how do we make that and push that and scale that program? That's been a really interesting item as we've started to come in and work on a lot of TIM projects, work with law enforcement of taking all of our knowledge of, yes, we can capture that environment, but there's a lot of other items that were showing up as, hey, are the batteries charged? Is the truck negative 20 degrees? And is everything ready to go? There's a lot of items on our side of, hey, how does this equipment work when we don't have 5 or 10 hours to plan for it and it needs to work now? So we've been really excited to break a lot of stuff and fail a lot. And we continue to build upon those failures and build a program. We currently have about 165 aircraft across our department, as well as on average, we're seeing anywhere from 15 to 30 operators get trained per year. But we keep a 1-to-1 ratio. Normally, if we train an operator, they have an aircraft with them and now a Starlink panel. But those three assets together are really what pull these together. But the big item that I really want to focus on is the grants, from everyday counts to stick and oh, you can switch over into the video, and smart grant. This is really helping us kind of push these technologies as, hey, that crazy idea of, hey, let's put a drone in a dock, or hey, let's go fly over that glacier outburst, robotics. All of these things are allowing for us to remote sense. We're building vehicles that allow for us to be in these locations. And we're testing these, on the weekends. We're bringing these with us. So for us, all of these tools are coming together where one person can do what used to take a team of 5. Avalanche mitigation. This is becoming a big item too. The ability to run up light towers on critical highway corridors or fly down ice roads. So all of these things are really bringing together such a diverse set of backgrounds and expertise that are allowing for us to capture more. But once again, all of these are pushing towards the repeatability and safety of the operator. So those are the key items, is if we can standardize the way this data is collected and how these systems can respond, it makes it as easy as an office printer where you can just say, hey, I need you to go check on this. We have eyes on scene. We're sharing that information. We're capturing data, or we're scanning the collision or fatality investigation, and we're moving stuff out of the way. So all of which are allowing for us to operate in these environments. Next slide, please. So I always like to talk about what's platforms we're using. Everyone's like, hey, what's successful? So of course, one of the big items that we're constantly looking at is a lot of the tariffs, the cost of platforms, NDAA compliant. So you'll see we have two systems. One thing that we definitely love, and I've been a DJI fanboy since the beginning, is aircrafts that can operate in high altitudes and in inclement weather. We are working with Skydio as well, and their X10 platform. We've been really impressed with it. So there's not one tool for the job. However, we are finding that a lot of these systems, especially with grants and what's allowed, are pushing towards American-made and NDAA. So you'll see today on how we talk about the docks and everything. Skydio is where we are focusing a lot of efforts on infrastructure inspection, especially near roads and highways, airports, and a lot of our critical corridors. But one of the items a lot of folks always forget about is hazmat. So when we are looking at these items and we're responding, even getting out, 80% of Alaska is accessible by aviation. So when we're responding to these events as a landslide or something, we have to fly. We don't have enough gear to spread across from California to Florida, from Texas up to Canada. We do not have enough gear to spread everything. So a lot of our folks have our systems, but we call it our 172 rule, which is basically, can it fit in the back of a Cessna 172? Perfect. You're probably bringing it with you. So staying small, nimble, back to the Starlink panels. We used to carry the big backpacks, and now we're down to the Starlink minis so that we can take them in a small case. We have about 4 hours of battery until we need to find charge. But overall, we're learning a lot of these items is how small, how effective we can be in live streaming that video out. So next slide, please. Now, one of the big items that you saw there on the items is remote connectivity, remote operations. What does this look like? We no longer are in the drone era of you send the drone pilot out there, we don't hear from him for 6 hours, he comes back and he's got video and photos. It's on the way out there, we're on Teams, we're on radio, we're on mobile LAN radio. We're also live streaming video. So if there's folks on site that are already there, they're sharing their stream to either Flight Deck or Skydio Cloud or whatever software that you're using. But this is also allowing for teams to then say, hey, I need to go do something. Can you take control? So this is where Beyond Visual Line of Sight comes in. And so where we're really excited is for us, when we have down on the bottom right, we had Sag River basically tearing away at our only road up to the North Slope. So for Alaska, that's a pretty critical item because that's all the oil and gas. And so we dropped a dock out there. We're able to constantly monitor the erosion. And then same thing over on the left, where we're looking at avalanche slide paths. Up above, we have two systems. We were testing both Skydio and DJI together at a recent landslide that went across the road. So when we're looking at remote operations, the ability to have either the pilot there or the physical hardware there and be able to operate remotely, that's been a key item. Now, a lot of this too, we've been partnering with Collins Aerospace on some of their radar technologies to assist with areas where we just don't have any coverage, or we need to increase airspace security or airspace awareness of where we're operating at. So next slide. Now, this is the normal dashboard. So as I was talking about before, where we're bringing together all these backgrounds, what you see here, we didn't know where this landslide was at. We didn't know where any of the house data was at. All we had was video. So this is the really cool thing of teamwork is you can see the folks on the left. I have Ellie, we have our deputy commissioner, and myself that are all loaded in here. But what are each of those folks doing? So our team's on the ground. It looks like Travis is flying. Travis basically got the initial 3D. So we show up on site. In about 10 minutes, we have this low res image that's then structured over the top of the terrain environment. So you can see it doesn't clip in that well, but that's okay. We just need to know how big is this landslide? Is the ground stable? What did it hit? And then Ellie with our GIS department, she logs in and she loads all the building footprint information. Now that allows for us to see, unfortunately, we're showing up to this area, but we can see building 210 no longer exists. Building 225 is also covered with debris. But all of that situational awareness we gained in about 15 minutes without having any previous knowledge, no imagery on site. So once again, a drone, a Starlink, calling back to these remote flight deck operations, we're pushing GIS down to the controllers. We're drawing the outline of the extent of the slide path. We have teams and crews looking on it, and we're sharing this live video with our M&O operators, our consultants that will be doing clearing, search and rescue teams, State Emergency Operations Center, where we're taking that initial window survey. And so all of these tools are really adding towards this, hey, really all we need is to get these pieces of technology out there, have them hosted by these community members, and it allows for us to override them and control them remotely, or basically sit in the driver or in the passenger seat and watch while they fly around these items. So when we're looking at that kind of model of a small drone and a Starlink panel, we're looking for less than $5,000, and we can have eyes on of these entire sites and start capturing data in real time. Next slide. So docs, now you can kind of see, hey, we're testing this model, and we were fortunate to get a US DOT SMART grant, which allowed for us to kind of test the model of what happens if we pre-deploy all these drones to Western Alaska. We train folks on GIS, we give them drones, we give them the ability to act with these platforms and operate underneath our COAs. And what we found was it works great, but not all the time do they answer their phones. They're not available always, or we have hardware problems. And so this kind of opens up the window of community docs. And so we've been working with Skydio on our, we call it the SOAR project, but this is testing the next generation of the X10 dock. And when we're looking at where to install these remote communities, along the roadway corridors, at airports. We will be installing one of these at Fairbanks International Airport here next month, and working on the UA. We're working with Aquasi and the UAS test site. But as we're starting to test these and make these resources available, how do we get these systems available for law enforcement? And so this has kind of been a test where, hey, does it tie into the Axon system? Can anybody dispatch it to get eyes on the operations centers? And so you can kind of start to see is how do we storytell with these systems? How do we have role-based priorities on who can use them? But they become a public asset when we're looking at these across the way. And we have considerable range extension with these because we're running off either Verizon or FirstNet or T-Mobile, and have that reliability either through secondary base stations or just onboard cellular. So next slide. And so now all of this data is coming. I will say when we first turned these docks on, we were using them daily. We were basically creating about 3 terabytes a month of data across Starlink. So when we look at all of our sites, you know, we're starting to hit up there at 60 terabytes a month with our entire Starlink array, which is a lot of data, but it's information that we've never got before. So as we're tying these systems in, we work really closely with Esri. These docks are now automated. So Wrangell, great example, Wrangell landslide. We did a 90-day detection time frame where we were off-site. We were in Juneau and Anchorage flying this site from almost 1,000 miles away. We did have a TFR, which is a temporary flight restriction for aircraft safety. We were monitoring VHF, but we were able to operate and capture all this data on the right here. So because this is kind of opening up the first view for a lot of folks that are just getting into, hey, we can respond to that traffic collision. Hey, we can respond to that natural disaster, or all of these things because we have the back-end connectivity. And this is solely running off of Starlink and operating from the radios on the dock. But we just removed this dock site, but I believe we got up to about 250 full remote scans. In total, we had about 650 remote flights that occurred without a single issue. So when we're looking at how long these docks can last, the flight times and how well they work, even through snow and rain and wind and downpour, I've been really impressed with these. So next slide. So overall, you know, when we talk about the scale of Alaska and these resources, this is kind of what we're looking at is, hey, how do we visualize where all these resources are? We are a massive organization. And I know when I first came into DOT, we're like, we are resource rich, but communication poor, because especially with folks coming and going, that institutional knowledge going in and out, how do we embody that and make sure that everybody knows where it's at? Of course, with the inbound of language models and smart systems and things like that, we're starting to see a lot more. But really, these are some of the key metrics that we're looking at is, we have 80 staffed locations across the state that oversee and have to respond all of our equipment and our procedures. But really, the key item is how do we digitize that? So next slide. So starting with communications, I know you guys have probably heard me say Starlink 1,000 times by now, but for Alaska, we were a dial-up internet was the best that we had in a lot of these places. So we were used to just working. We didn't have radio services, we didn't have repeaters. We have large gaps in our communication items. So going offline was quite a common item until now, where we're able to basically rebroadcast or show up to these environments and rebroadcast critical services. So one of the key items is down here on the bottom right, where we've been working with Rescue 42 and FirstNet, but being able to take these mini CRDs and the SLC Plus and show up to these dead zones and broadcast a two-mile bubble of FirstNet. So now that you kind of start to see, hey, cell phones, radios that are Smart Connect enabled, and drones, all tying back through Starlink and connecting live stream video. So you can start to see, hey, if all I have to do is bring these two briefcases and all of our technology works wherever we show up, this starts to be a pretty interesting step and repeat model when we're looking at this. Same with D-drone, counter UAS. That has been a system that we've been starting to test and evaluate, but really bringing the situational awareness of what's happening in this environment, how are we tying all these things together? So next slide. But the big item for us is exactly what I was saying is, hey, the emergency response plan isn't call Ryan. It's, hey, jump onto that virtual agent or that assistant and say, hey, what resources do we have in Bethel? Or, hey, we had a fatal collision on the Seward Highway just south of Girdwood. What resources are on this side or on this side? So all of our vehicles, all of our connectivity, all of our drones, all the docks, we start looking at this, hey, cloud compute resources. It really just allows for anybody that is authorized to be in this system to be able to visualize where those resources are at. And same with connectivity. We've had 3 fiber cuts here lately. And so fiber cut goes offline. Now all these services that you thought would never have issues are not connecting. So we have a redundant connection by using Starlink and low Earth orbit services to then either go back to the internet or just a direct link to our edge and cloud compute resources. Next slide. So the last item is on our side too, where we're starting to test kind of the future of our vehicles is, hey, how do we build a Starlink equipped vehicle, the ability to rebroadcast FirstNet and cellular devices, or the ability to just park a vehicle someplace with EVs, drop a drone dock on the back of it, and be able to monitor traffic. You can see on the bottom left too, we've been working with FreeFly on their Flying Sun platform, which allows basically that system to go up in the air to about 400 feet and broadcast about 1 million foot candles of light. So that plugged into a Chevy Silverado gives you about 27 hours of runtime, completely battery powered. Pretty impressive. Now, do you need 27 hours? Probably not, but you can start to think about that too, is, hey, we put a cell repeater on there, we put a camera on there. There's a lot of room to improve upon these platforms with this technology. So as we're looking at how this stuff applies to Alaska, mobile friendly for us, just because we cannot invest in putting these systems everywhere due to the cost. So as we're building drone docks and these solutions, we're putting them into vehicles. We're putting a lot of our investment into these systems for first responders to have with them or have in the area that can be dispatched at a moment's notice. So next slide. And for all of our GIS folks in the building, weather reporting. This is an item as we build these sites and we start to put these systems out there. I always like to show these items too, where we're directly reporting and highlighting how all of this data is being collected. So we're sharing this information with our federal partners but we're filling in the gaps. So this has been a key item is not only are we filling in the gaps for law enforcement, but we're filling in the gaps of ADS-B coverage, flight safety, ground information, weather information. We have so many microclimates across the state that it is easy, since we have the backhaul, to be able to show up in these environments and share this data and leave that information there to kind of move forward. Next slide. So as I said before, 15 terabytes per year. It's crazy to see how much we're at 60 terabytes a year now. So our IT guys absolutely hate us, which as they should. But how do we take this data and where is the end in sight? And I think that's one of the key items that we're really excited with dock technology and a lot of these is we're pretty confident that here in the future, we won't have to store all of this data, because if we have a dock installed remotely, we can go grab it at any time. So we just capture what we need, then we send everything else and we delete everything, which is a really interesting strategy, instead of just, hey, we need to collect everything and store it in this geodatabase, and it never gets used. That's what really we're looking at, especially for the amount of information we're collecting and how important that data is. You can see the workflow from the dock via Starlink. We process with either SiteScan or Reality Engine. That dumps into our enterprise service. And then we can push it out to either OpenAI Studio or out to any other language model that can visualize it. Video is also another item that will be coming in here shortly with Video Server, but push it out to the web with these services. So next slide. So taking everything we just talked about today and applying it to, we have drones on site, we have law enforcement, we have first responders. How do we take all of that and allow for us to visualize that information in real time? So we had a glacier outburst happen in Juneau, where we were able to utilize all of these systems and tools together into one. And if you can also press play on the Survey 123 document, this allows for us to do the window surveys. Oh yeah, it's playing. So from our full motion video to the window surveys to the crews collecting this data, all of this information is feeding back to a centralized dashboard and coming in real time. So we're looking at where damage is, where imagery is being updated, and that's being populated, that's getting processed. We have window surveys occurring. So it's giving us this real-time situational assessment, this real-time environment, but also allowing for us to stay completely transparent. So everybody's seeing everything. If we miss something, it's there, and we're learning from our mistakes. I want to make sure we failed 100 times before we even got close to this working. And we still are having, hey, we can't transfer a 200 gig file. That was a new item with this project. And so, as always, not fake it till you make it, but you will basically fail your way forward on a lot of these technologies. So, next slide. And with that, I will quit talking. If you guys have any other questions or information, please reach out to me. But I really appreciate time here today and presenting. So thank you much.
We have some questions here. We have about 20 minutes left. And I'm going to get right to a couple for Bruce and Laramie, pardon me. What, if any, authorizing by the region was needed for emergency responder signal priority? Bruce or Laramie?
I think the question is referring to maybe other agencies within a region, other emergency service providers. And
sounds like it.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. And to my knowledge, we have not really involved other agencies. In this particular area, there are occasionally emergency vehicles from another city, city of Shoreline or city of Bellevue might respond. And currently they would not be eligible for cloud preemption. That could be set up pretty easily though.
Yeah, and that's what I've seen from my side too is if there is that motivation for mutual aid, having other jurisdictions come into your jurisdiction and use your preemption. That is a city to city or city to county conversation, but with all that we see in terms of the capabilities of newer controllers, it allows for a lot of flexibility within the system.
Absolutely. Another one for you guys. What guidance might you offer for other regions considering cloud-based signal preemption technologies for emergency response?
I would say do it. It's just a very effective way to get your emergency vehicles to the scene faster and safely. It does require NTCIP traffic signal controllers. So there is if you have older legacy equipment or proprietary type of firmware in your signal cabinets, then you may need to replace some software or equipment. And you need highly reliable communication. But other than that, you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah,
Go for it.
yeah. From my standpoint, we really encourage agencies that are thinking about it, jurisdictions that are thinking about it, to just pilot. There are a lot of opportunities because there's nothing in the cabinet, nothing on the vehicles. It's a pretty quick thing to spin up. And at the end of it, we really want cities to fully vet the system. Don't give it the easy intersections way out of town. Give it the challenging ones and try it during difficult times of day. And there is so much data that you can iterate really quickly. Try one strategy on Monday, try one strategy on Tuesday. And by Wednesday, you would have the data to see which is the best for your unique operating environment.
Absolutely. Question for you, Ryan, similar to Laramie and Bruce. What, if any, authorizing by the state was needed for use or use cases of drones?
A lifetime of paperwork filing. I would file more paperwork than I fly. And I always, I never wanted to be in that position, but yes. I will say the FAA has been amazing here lately with a lot of their efforts to get law enforcement underway. But I saw there was a question too for can DOT and law enforcement both use drone dock and with Caltrans in Alaska? The answer is yes. If I had to do a quick explanation of it, currently drone docks are being operated from state agencies under public and civil operations. Caltrans, for example, operates under Part 107 and Alaska operates as a public agency. Each individual agency that utilizes that asset needs to either have a COA, which is a certificate of authorization from the FAA, and prior training that allows for them to operate that system either from Skydio or DJI or any of the other dock manufacturers. So FAA is not the item that is, I would say, roadblocking it. A lot of it at the moment is this technology finally is getting authorized. We're seeing beyond visual line of sight operations opening up for many departments. It's really just how fast states are adopting it, learning from their mistakes, failing, or as we're doing, partnering together with other states so that we kind of crowdsource this and all learn from each other at the same time, which is really the benefit of all of this is taking what works someplace else, making our own flavor, improving upon it, and sharing it back with the group. So hopefully that answers the question is yes, there are, it's basically just installing these docks, installing these technologies, cloud first on a lot of these pushes, and getting the correct partners in line to start testing and deploying these systems.
Yes, thank you for that. So another one for you, Ryan. What has the public perception been to the use of drones for emergency response?
We've spent a lot of time, well, especially with this, it's like, hey, do you mind if we install this suspicious looking box in your neighborhood? Yes, I mean, we spent a lot of time, especially with Wrangell, where we had the landslide. We did have some folks that lost their lives in that landslide. And so we had to treat a lot of the data with sensitivity, but we did a lot of outreach with the community, with a lot of the students, with a lot of the folks of, hey, this dock is going out there, but what this is doing is it's checking to make sure, ground's not moving. So, we're not just showing up in these places, these communities, but we're making sure these communities understand, hey, that tool is keeping us safe. That tool is doing its job there. And we're definitely looking at that, especially with some of our SOAR initiatives, where we'll be installing these docks throughout Alaska, Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington, and testing these different environments. What works well in Western Alaska, with a limited population, probably will not work well in the heart of LA.
Sure.
I think that's exactly what we're looking forward to. Is we're going to fail our way through this together, find and learn from our mistakes, and continue building these. But public outreach is a crucial item so that folks are aware of what's inside that blinking box that's sitting here making a noise, and takes off every couple of minutes. So
Yeah, I remember our first exposure to UAS drones was the city of Chula Vista in Southern California. The police department there, they were launching drones from their I guess police headquarters mostly for police activity, but ultimately were started to use it for traffic incident management. So we had a really cool collaboration with them for a while. I have another question for Bruce and Laramie. What future traffic signal upgrades may be a priority for existing signal systems before cloud-based EVP can be implemented?
I would just say reliable communication and an NTCIP traffic signal controller. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the benefits of data standards is, I mean, light and cloud TSP would not exist, and EVP would not exist without data standards. And so it's just making sure that when you are looking for that signal modernization plan, that they adhere to data standards, because they enable a lot of plug and play, a lot of a lot of interoperability. And so a lot of companies and a lot of folks talk about interoperability, but data standards are the proof of that. And so making sure that they can speak the same language to each other is key.
Yeah. What would you say to what would you say to municipalities, owner authorities that are considering EVP? And I know TSP has been around a long time, and the old, original Opticom systems and all that before the cloud-based stuff that you guys specialize in. And the reason I asked that question is because we don't know of too many jurisdictions, municipalities, like I said, and other areas that are employing EVP. What Why is that, do you think? Or is it the cost overall, or maintenance, or all the above?
In my opinion, it's a lack of data, and I think without data, you don't see maybe how bad things are. You especially if there was a legacy EVP system that was purchased and installed, you think you have something, but without the data to prove its efficacy, you don't. You may not be motivated to look elsewhere. You can kind of get anecdotal evidence from fire chiefs, but without the data to prove it, you may not see how far the floor has dropped out from the system that you purchased maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah. And
Jim?
Who was
Sorry,
that?
this is Vaishali. There's a bunch of questions still in the Q&A. May I bring some of those up to surface?
Didn't we field a bunch in the Q&A earlier?
Right. When we answer them in the Q&A, it only goes to the person who has been asking the question more often. So we try to ask them verbally as well so that everyone can hear the response.
Okay. Go ahead, Vishali.
Yes. So one of the questions was from Sean Laffey. In addition to the observed increase in green time for emergency vehicles, have you also realized any other benefits that Laramie mentioned, such as improved response time? And have you encountered any challenges with using the cellular network to request green signals, particularly during high volume events like football games?
So it looks like
I don't know
Bruce
if-
answered that.
I'll chime in quickly. I think that answer only went to Sean. So for everyone's benefit, I'll repeat that. So the first question about reduction in fire response times. We've heard anecdotally the drivers are highly confident that they're getting faster response time. We have not investigated, but we can and we will do that from our dispatch data. Second question was, I think was asking whether at major events like a football game when there's a lot of cellular traffic, if there's any reduction in service or communication. And I haven't not aware of anything there. Our traffic signal communication is typically fiber optic that would be immune to that, but it's possible that the apparatus is competing with other cellular traffic. Laramie can probably speak to that better.
Yeah, and I can just say a bit under the hood is that that's one of the ways that we use machine learning is to kick out a lot of that GPS noise. Because especially in these, especially where there's a lot of competing signals, especially in, urban canyons, you can get a lot of noise. And so that's one of the ways that we use machine learning is to kick out the sources that we see as unreliable in that moment.
And then there was a question about how long the video is stored. And if so, who could potentially make use of that in terms of the light video that you demoed?
Totally. Yeah. So I think our default is to store all this information for a year. But that's completely customizable based on jurisdictional needs. I know if there are insurance requirements, grant reporting requirements, all of those can be tailored, but off the shelf, it's about a year.
Okay. And I think there was also a question for Ryan on, given the large volume of data, how is the storage and processing of that data better managed? And I personally have a question of how, if any way, is that data being shared with the broader Alaska DOT enterprise for other uses?
Yeah, so that was kind of the problem that we walked ourselves into, is we gave everybody access to these data creation devices. And I'll be the first to tell you, we didn't know that we were going to redline all of our drives. I started with IT, was not big fans of us because we broke our network pretty fast. Shortly after that, we kind of went back to the drawing board where we structured, hey, here's all the data we're creating. Here's what can be stored. Here's what can be deleted. And so we went into that as we went into partnership with Esri, where they came in and kind of did a full system analysis of, hey, here is how we store items. Here's what goes into the geo database. And from there, we started breaking down a lot of the silos. Is now we can search all of our imagery that's created. As well as publish that to we have an Alaska Geospatial Council, which is all state agencies. So all imagery that's created by public agencies is available to the public. And so that then gets sourced up there from our image server. Same thing with video. Anything that is project related, we save for a year before it is deleted. But that's kind of where we're pushing a lot of it is, hey, we are bringing everything, we're processing it on-prem. So that's another big item is, unlike the rest of you guys, I saw there's a couple folks from Alaska, but the rest of the folks in the contiguous United States, we don't have fast access to data centers. And so we have started building smaller edge compute centers around our state that we can send data to, process it, cut all the fat off, and only lift the final product to the cloud or Azure Washington Data Center West, which cuts down on a lot of our ingress costs to the cloud by not putting all of the raw imagery, putting the final product, moving it around. It's just a simple lift and we're done. So we're limited on bandwidth to the cloud and those items, edge compute, and having that pre-processing has done a lot for us into the geodatabase and environment that we have there for sharing all of that information, both geo-rectified and orthomosaics and video across our enterprise system.
Very
Well,
good strategy.
with that, we have 4 minutes left, and I want to first thank Ryan, Bruce, and Laramie for their time and outstanding presentations to the National TIM community. We still have over 140 participants with us today, and a huge thank you to all of them. I always take a couple looks at the participant list, and I see many of our champions, our partners across the nation that are interested in everything that you guys do. And I want to, besides sharing these resources here, these links to various resources, I want to say that the next 3 Talking Tims webinars are going to cover topics from the Everyday Count 7 Next Generation TIM Technologies for Saving Lives. Our contract team is already preparing of the 46 states, I think it is, that participated in EDC 7 Next Gen TIM. Over those months, starting in June, July, and August, the Talking TIM platform that we're on here today, Adam, and of course, Executive Director Nick Ramphos, that was also joined us today, are very kindly going to let us conduct those EDC 7 webinars over the next 3 months. So make sure, if you're not registered, that you do. That top URL there, and all the rest of those URLs there contain a lot of very important information, including the self-assessment, by the way. Let's see. Vishali,
Yeah.
anything else we missed? We got 2 minutes, and then I want to say goodbye.
No, I think there were a couple of questions about the training site, and it will be live within the week or so, and you'll get a formal announcement from the team on that. And I know there were some questions we didn't quite get to, but we'll save that for a future effort, I presume. So,
Yes.
Great
And
presentations today. Great information.
Yeah, indeed. And many thanks to you, Vishali, for all your work making this happen. And I think that's a wrap. So everyone stay safe, keep doing great things, and head on a swivel, as we say. Out of your car on our nation's roadways, a very dangerous place to be. So God bless. Take care, everyone.